Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's event, Advocacy 101 webinar, our second in a year-long series of advocacy training webinars that we'll be doing this year. I will be your moderator today. My name is Nina Oslu-Tunjli, and I'm both the Chief Counsel of Government and Public Affairs at Americans for the Arts, and I'm the Executive Director of the Arts Action Fund. I use she, her pronouns. And to describe myself, I am a Middle Eastern woman with shoulder-length black hair, wearing a red turtleneck, and a background image behind me of our Arts Vote artwork that was created for us by artist Shepard Ferry. I'm speaking today from Arlington, Virginia, which sits on the ancestral lands of the Powhatans. We've got a great program for you today, and I'm excited to get started, but first some quick reminders. And as you can see, we're highlighting our speakers today that you'll hear from each one. And I'll introduce each one before they begin. Please note that this presentation is being recorded. The recording will be available in just a couple of business days, probably by the end of this week, on the current activity page here for ArtsU, as well as on the Advocacy 101 Resource Center page that I've highlighted at the bottom of this image, located at artsactionfund.org, advocacy-101-resource-center-2023. Also, an automated live transcript is available for viewing while you're watching today. To turn it on or off, press the CC or closed captions button at the bottom of your screen, and then select Show or Hide Subtitle. Today's Advocacy 101 resources, as well as all of the speakers' PowerPoint slides, will be posted in two places. It's already available for downloading on the Arts Action Fund site, where you have that URL listed on the bottom of the left side of the screen. And if you come back to the ArtsU website, which is on Americans for the Arts, you will see a resource section added with all of these resources as well, and that will happen later this week. The video recording link for today's webinar will also be posted on both of the sites that I just mentioned and will be available at the end of this week. There will be a time for your questions at the end of today's presentations, hopefully at least 15 minutes for questions and answers. And you can submit your questions beginning now in the Q&A function. Please don't use the chat section, use the Q&A. And if you want to make sure the question is asked, you want to upvote someone who may have already posted the question, because I'll take the questions beginning from the top, and they represent the most popular questions the most people want to hear from. Should you need any technical assistance today, please put them in the chat box and send it to Mital at AFTA, who's in this program, and she will be sure to follow up with you. And with that, I'm pleased to start today's programming by introducing our first speaker. Next slide, please. Nolan Bivens is the president and CEO of Americans for the Arts, and I am so pleased to invite my boss to begin the show. Nolan.
Yes, Nina, good afternoon to everyone. It definitely is my pleasure to be here to open today's webinar, and also to welcome everyone that's participating throughout the audience. As we come to you today, I wanted to just emphasize one thing, and the word is advocacy. And here at Americans for the Arts, we are expanded and continue to build upon that. And the way that we're referring to it here is equitable advocacy, which really means in a broad term that we're trying to look at arts through the lens of the economic impact of the arts, social, cultural, and educational. We also want to do that in an equitable way and reaching all the corners of arts, whether it's rural, urban, or suburban, and in different parts of the country that's being served by the arts. So really, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome you here. So excited for the program we have. We have some great speakers, and I'm excited to get on with that. And so I'll pass it back to Nina. Thank you again.
Thank you, Nolan. Now that we can begin our educational portion of the program, I'm going to invite David Reed to join me. He is Policy Director at Brownstein, which is the largest lobbying firm in Washington, D.C. They are part of a law firm that is headquarters in Denver, Colorado, and they have been successfully serving our field and Americans for the Arts as a pro bono client of theirs. So I really appreciate David, and welcome to a series of colloquies that we're going to have together to talk about things. But what I'd like to first begin with is to let folks know that earlier this year, we created a policy survey to check in with our field members about what are the policies that are most important to you for us to pursue as policy objectives in Congress. And so I want to share the top 4 that came, and thank you for our ASL interpreters joining us now. Welcome. So the top funding issues, which will be reflected in the programming that we do today. Number 1 by far was funding for the National Endowment for the Arts. Number 2 was arts education funding through the Department of Education. Third was arts funding again, but through various other federal agencies. And you'll hear about some very interesting ones at the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs today. And then finally, charitable tax incentives to increase private giving to the arts. So with that as the backdrop of what we are focusing our policy agenda on this year, I want to just share before I ask David some questions, what our 2023 congressional timeline is looking like this year. And with the help of David, we put this together. So we are now in what's called the 118th Congress, because Congress begins anew every 2 years. So if a bill didn't get enacted into law by the end of the 117th Congress, which ended at the end of 2022, a little bit of 2023, it essentially dies and it has to be reintroduced. And each Congress lasts 2 years. So you can see how many years we've successfully as a country been exhibiting democracy through these Congresses every 2 years. In the first quarter, January through March, it was really a lot of housekeeping, especially after an election where party control changes. The House is now controlled by Republicans. The Senate is fully in control of Democrats. Last year, they had to share because it was equal between Republicans and Democrats in the Senate. But now there's a full majority in the Senate. And we awaited the president's budget for what the White House would like Congress to put together for funding for FY24. So just so everyone understands, even though the year is 2023, what we're lobbying for is FY24, 2024 funding, which would officially begin with the congressional calendar on October 1, 2023. So it's a few months of 2023 and the majority of 2024 that covers that fiscal year. And then you'll see as I go through this quarterly calendar, the likelihood of it all happening so neatly is probably very little. So for the second quarter, which we're going to begin in just a couple of days, we are expecting the House of Representatives to introduce their own Republican budget of what they would like to do. And we're going to be asking David what those anticipations are. Also, what we'd like advocates to do is to get as many of your members of Congress to join caucuses that some of our speakers are going to speak about later on today, sponsor or introduce certain policy bills. And then we're going to be seeing Congress conduct a series of budget hearings. Now, in your states, budget appropriations mean the same thing, but not on Capitol Hill here, Capitol here in Washington, D.C. There is a budget committee that determines the overall allocation of money that each of the appropriation subcommittees can spend. And then that begins the appropriations process to try to get as much funding for the issues that we care about within those bills. And then there will be committee hearings. And then we're going to see a hiccup happen around the debt ceiling that David's going to talk about in a moment. In the third quarter, we're going to see the Senate take more heavy action as opposed to the House doing a ton of House appropriations. Constitutionally, the House has to go first, and then the Senate goes after that in setting their appropriation levels. Their allocations are going to be slightly different, and there becomes conflicts already. And then you'll see a big recess for the month of August where they're back home in your districts, opportunities for you to meet your members of Congress, invite them to your events throughout the month of August. And theoretically, as I mentioned, the fiscal year ends for the federal government on September 30th, 2023. Very likely, what a continuing resolution known as a CR will have to take place because they have not finished that kind of appropriations business. I guess I've been doing this for 30 years and it hasn't been done in 30 years, so probably even longer. And then in the fourth quarter is where the real serious negotiations happen between the House and Senate to try to get something done. And with that, I'd like to take down this slide and bring on David for the first question. Thank you, David.
Absolutely.
Can you give us a sense of what the political landscape is in Washington today with a divided Congress and how it's going to work this year?
Sure. And as you mentioned, we've got the Senate remains in the Democrats' hands. The House flipped to the Republicans, although it's a very slim majority. As some of you may recall, there was a series of votes that now Speaker McCarthy had to go through in order to secure his speakership, 15 to be exact, which is the most in history. And that's because he's got quite a raucous caucus. And that really does sort of spell what it's going to look like and what it has looked like so far on some of the things that we are looking to get done. So he's got a lot of wrangling in order to get his caucus to move in the direction to get some of these must-pass pieces of legislation done. The one most important for us, of course, is the appropriations bills. So as we are, making the case for increased funding for the arts, for the NEA funding, for some of the programs that we're looking at to include an increase in arts education, arts funding, and other agencies, we really have to take into account, that particular dynamic. So with the flip, obviously, you're going to have more champions in the Senate as we are looking at the budget that was released by the president. There was an increase in the arts funding that we were happy to see. You're likely going to see the Senate, either take that or increase that in the requests that they put through. And, when we start to see those appropriations bills come together over the coming months, the House likely is not going to. And that, that is where a good bit of our efforts are currently. But again, those are the types of dynamics that we're seeing and that we're working to navigate.
David, could you talk about some of the specific rules that could make it really challenging in the House as a result of the change in leadership and the things that Speaker McCarthy had to agree to by the more conservative side of his caucus?
Yes, there's two main things I think that are important here. One is the commitment that he made and that others in his caucus made him make that would take our spending levels down to the 2022 levels. So what he is committed to, and he's likely not going to be successful in doing this, is producing a budget that has our spending levels at at the spending levels that were 2 years ago. But he has said that he is going to hold harmless Social Security and Medicare, as well as defense spending. So if he were to actually do that, if the House Republicans were actually to do that, that would decimate almost every non-discretionary or discretionary rather domestic program. That would be politically perilous for a number of folks, both folks in the Democratic Party as well as his own caucus. The other thing is, and we don't see that actually coming to bore because of the political peril that would create. The other is creating a modified open rule process. And so that's, it sounds a little complicated, but essentially what it is he is attempting, or is through his messaging, attempting to open up the process of legislating on the floor of the House of Representatives. So that essentially gives more folks, more rank and file, the ability to propose amendments around pieces of legislation that will be making their way to the floor. And what that essentially means is that, we of course need to track those amendments as they are put forward, because there may be amendments that are brought forth that try to cut or pull back the funding that we're trying to fight for day in and day out. Or might be trying to go after certain programs that we care about, which makes it all that much more important to maintain those strong relationships with those offices to, ensure that they are voting against certain amendments that may come to the floor, or for good amendments that actually might benefit the community. So, the way that they've done it is a modified open rule. So that essentially allows for us to see what those amendments are generally the day before, and we can go through and then we can immediately go into that strategy. Us having those conversations with key staff, as well as you all having those conversations with those members and their teams that you all have gotten to know.
And David, to kind of illustrate this point, so later on in today's webinar, we're going to hear about key leaders on various different committees that have an overpowering and domineering influence on what happens with legislation. But when something comes to the floor, every member of Congress becomes important because they all have a vote. So when David was saying we only get 1 day notice, what that means is you need to be developing relationships with your members of Congress now, so that when we need them to vote against a weakening amendment or vote for a positive amendment, you're not first introducing yourself. You have already developed that relationship. They know that you are a reliable resource for your community as a constituent. And that will make all the difference for us to be able to win these victories in the House, especially. That rule doesn't apply in the Senate, but it does apply in the House. And I want to ask you one last question, David, and that is about threats to government shutdowns as a result of this divided government. What do you see happening?
Sure. So the threat to government shutdown, there are a few. One that you've heard and we've mentioned is around the debt limit. Now, that's not necessarily the part that would lead to the government shutdown, but that would lead to a default, which would be catastrophic. I don't foresee that happening, but there does need to be a deal to come together between the House Republicans and the White House. Those are the two key parties that are having the negotiations around the debt limit at this point, which is likely to, buttress up to around mid to late June, which is when that needs to be resolved. The other is a government shutdown, and basically that would happen if we were not to come to a resolution around the appropriations bills before the September 30th deadline, which is the end of the fiscal year. What we'll likely see, and Nina mentioned this before, is a continuing resolution. So that would essentially be a bill that would be put in place to allow for the continued funding of the government for a certain period of time at the same levels as FY23. That would take us to another point in time later this year, where the negotiations would hopefully take us to the negotiations or to a wrap up around an omnibus bill, which would take us into the remainder of FY24. A lot has to happen between now and September 30th. As Nina mentioned, we're having those conversations with our members and with our champions to ensure that our priorities are incorporated into the bills that are being discussed and being negotiated. But as we get to that deadline, that's when things are really going to start to, rubber hitting the road. And we'll be making sure that we're in the room making the case for what we care about, as they finalize those negotiations.
Thank you, David. Thank you for being here. We're going to now move on to our next speaker, which will be Jay Dick, who is our Senior Director of State and Local Government Affairs at Americans for the Arts. And what he's going to do is give the basics of advocacy and tips and best practices of moving forward on how you, as grassroots advocates across the country, can be an effective arts advocate for the country. Jay, can you come on now?
Hey, Nina, how are you doing?
Good.
Thanks, everyone. I'm so glad to be with you today. So as Nina said, I'm going to give you some general tips of how to go about starting to advocate. Some of you might know some of these, but some of you not know all of this. And so I think I'm going to have some secrets for everyone here. Next slide, please. So let's just start out with some key principles of our advocacy. Advocacy, big or small, should really be part of your regular activities. Just as you go about as an arts advocate or an arts administrator, ask yourself, how can I be trying to make sure that I am promoting the arts? And it can be to your elected officials, it can be to your chambers of commerce, it can be just to the general public. And so always kind of ask yourself, how can I be promoting what I do? And that's something we do a lot anyway. Oftentimes being successful depends on the unified message. That's why we're kind of here today. That's why Americans for the Arts works with a coalition of national arts partners out there to come together with a message with an idea, with a strategy, so we can all be saying the same thing together at the same time. And that really makes a difference. So always make sure you do that. And at the same time, on the state level, many of you have a state arts advocacy organization who does the same thing. So be part of them and be part of that message too. Another thing we need to be doing is expand our advocacy efforts. This is, okay, you're here, you're an advocate for the arts, and that's wonderful. But how about your family and your friends and the people you meet on the streets? Invite them to be part of our advocacy work, to go sign up and be part of our million-person army. That's where we want to get to. We want to be that, you know, AARP or that Sierra Club with millions of people. So when we speak on Capitol Hill, it really, really does matter. Another thing we want you to do is get to know your elected officials and their staff. And this doesn't have to be always through the arts. I know my local elected officials through my homeowners association, for example. They know what I do for a living, and they know I am passionate about the arts. So think about how you can authentically get to know your elected officials and develop that relationship, because that really helps and that really matters, because it's really hard to tell a friend no than tell a stranger no. So get to know your elected officials. Politicians respond to voters. Politicians respond to constituents. So, lead, with your local stories. Tell how the arts matter locally to you, and then combine that with your local data points there. And this is all something that we have on our website to help you make those cases. But stories and data together, and always keep it local, because that's what, no matter if your elected official is a federal, state, or local person, they all care about local. And then be your authentic self. Your passion will show. We have lots of great stories. So just do that. Next slide, please. We live in a polarized world. And so sometimes we have to be careful of how we go about advocating. So here's a couple tips about that. It's about policy, not personality. So keep it about what the arts do and how they matter in the way that we conduct our lives and in government. It is not partisan. It is local policies impacting local constituents. Again, going back to that local area there. The arts is strongly going to help with our work, whether you're whoever you're advocating for. Also remind our elected officials that the arts can help address other issues, say education, economic growth, youth suicide, etc. And it's more than just so much more. Understand what elected officials care about, and then incorporate that into our talking points. So if I know that an elected official really cares about our educational system, let's go talk about arts and education. I probably won't talk about arts and arts and healthcare, for example. So think about what they do, a little research and find out what your elected official really cares about, and then you're going to laugh with an elected official to do something that will get them. So don't go in and make an outrageous ask because they're not going to take you seriously and they're not going to be able to do it. So, be rational and thoughtful about our asks that we make with them. Next slide, please. I was talking about those other issues. I just want to pause real quickly to talk about our Social Impact Explorer. This is 29 different authentic arts and categories. So housing, justice reform, transportation. So here's a great tool for you to learn about what the arts do in a more broader sense in our community there. And this will help you when you go to talk to your elected officials. Plus, elected officials love this slide too. Next slide, please. So why should we be doing this? Why does it matter? Basically, if elected officials do not hear from us, they're going to assume a couple things: that everything is fine, no additional funding is needed, or no new policies are needed. And they're also going to say, or they will also assume no one cares about the arts. That's the worst thing, for them to think, oh, no one cares. Because if they don't think anyone cares, they're going to be likely to cut their support for the arts. So we have to stand up, we have to be heard, and we have to make sure that they understand that we are voters and we care about this. Keep in mind, you're the experts. This is what you do for either your job, if you're an arts administrator or an artist, or even just someone who loves the arts. Take the time to educate and inform these elected officials about what the arts do, because elected officials are generalists. They have to know a little bit about a lot of different things. But if we can help educate them, it's going to matter. And if we're not going to do it, no one is going to do that. So make sure you do that. And then finally, numbers matter. Again, ask your friends, your family, the people on the street to sign up to be part of our million-person army to be able to make a difference. Next slide. I just want to show a little bit, we talked about our stories and data. I just want to talk a little bit about on our Arts Action Fund. We all have state fact sheets about the arts and their economics in each state. This is important because when you're talking to your elected officials, they really don't care about national numbers. They care about state or district or local numbers. So this is a great tool to find out about what's going on in your state. And so please go check out the fact sheet for your state. And these were just updated by our wonderful partners at the Arts Action Fund. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit some goals and some rules for you as you are going to be getting involved more in advocacy. One of our goals is to build an ongoing professional relationship with these elected officials and their staff. If you wait until you need to ask them for something, you're too late. Let's work at making sure that they understand what's going on, they understand who you are, what the issues are, they understand and they support us, then we make the ask. Knowledge is power. Become a resource. Again, as I said, elected officials, they're generalists. So become that expert for them. So when they have a question about the arts or their creative economy, they'll call you up and they'll say, hey, tell me more about this. And then make sure you give them an honest feedback. So make sure you help them with that. Never assume you know what that elected official's position is. Ask them. That's sometimes the biggest issue that we see when we're advocating is we fail to say, do you support us? Do you support this policy proposal? So make sure you actually ask them what they have to, what they believe. And then, as I said earlier, get to know their staffs and stay in regular contact. It's great to know the elected official and develop that, but the staff are so important, whether it's on the federal, state, or local levels. So get to know the staff. The staff is the people who give the elected official their information. They're the persons that oftentimes they're the last people they talk to before they go vote. So if you have the staff person in your corner, you're going to be way ahead of things. Next slide. Okay, so where do we start? So the first start is where do we get to know, where do we identify our elected officials here? So as you know, it's constituent based when dealing with elected officials. Basically, the first level is, can you vote for them? Are you in their district? Do you live there? Secondly, maybe your organization has a footprint in their districts, or maybe you're just across the district line, but you have a lot of people coming from there. Or lastly, maybe your audience comes from their district. So the lower you can get to the constituent base, the better, but sometimes all three of these will work for you. But don't bother or don't go asking someone across the country to vote or contact them because you're not a constituent and they won't care. Okay, so let's go find out how to do this. So go to the artsactionfund.org. And then you're going to go ahead and click on the Act button on the top. Next slide, and hit the next button, please. And then you're going to, after you do that, then you're going to find your legislators. Hit the next one then. And then a pop-up box is going to show up of asking you what your zip code is. Pop in your zip code, then hit the continue button. And you're going to get this wonderful list of all your elected officials from the president on down to your state house and your state senator there. So let's just see what is in all this information here. So say you want to learn more about your federal elected official. So in this case, it's Representative Maria Salazar from Miami. So you click on her, and it's going to come up to some contact information. This is, you can see different things like her website, her Facebook, her Twitter. And then the most important thing, hit the next one, is there's a district address there. This is where they're at locally. So you don't have to come to Washington, D.C. You can stay local and go and set up meetings with them there. So keep that in mind there. Next, you can check out what their committees are. So on the federal level, those people that are really important to us sit on the committees of jurisdiction. So appropriators, for example. So you want to see their appropriator. Maybe they're on small business. So this helps you understand what you should be talking with them about. So again, if they're on the small business, as the Congresswoman is, you're going to want to talk about the SBA and the arts, things along those lines. Continuing, we list their staff there. And so you can look to see who their chief of staff is, different things like that. And you can see who their scheduler is. That's important to know who their scheduler is in that, because the scheduler is the person who's going to help you be able to understand how to get in there. We will be able to see the art staffer. It's not on this screen here, but you're going to in the near future be able to just come in here and see who their art staff are ours. So that's an important thing. So you can have a name to advocate with. Next slide, please. Lastly, we have bills. And so there's not a lot because the Congress has just started here, but you can see who there's, which bills there's co-sponsoring or different, in this case, a dear colleague letter, which my colleagues later on will explain what that means. But again, you can see kind of what they're sponsoring, and it gives you a better idea of what they are doing in their district there. Next slide, please. Okay, so you know who your elected officials are. Now, how do we start? So we have different ways to communicate to your elected officials, and this kind of goes in increasing levels of difficulty. You can send an email. We're going to talk about that a little bit. You can do the old-fashioned, write a U.S. Postal Service letter out or type it even. But the most important thing of those two is personalize it. Tell your story. That's what really matters to the elected officials, is telling that story. You can make a phone call. Again, the numbers are on those pages that we just showed you. To call them up and say, I'm a constituent, and I urge the senator to do X, Y, and Z. You can meet with them in their office, whether the district office, the DC office, your state capitol's office, or back in at your own organization. Host them at your organization so they can learn what their vote in DC, how that equates to what happens locally. So you're making that great connection there. So lots of different things that you can do to contact your elected official. Next slide. So we talked about emails. So here's, you go back to our Arts Action Fund website that I showed you about. Hit the next, please. You can go back up to that ACT button, see the Arts Action Center, and then it's going to bring you to a page that looks like this. This is our current action alert. In this case, it's about the NEA funding. It makes it very easy. Notice there's a little message box there that's kind of grayed out. That's for you to tell your personal story in. So make sure you go and you add your personal little story in there. It doesn't have to be much, but a little something that will help them, show that, hey, this is a real person here, and they have a real concern about the arts. The other messages are in there that you can customize if you want, but we have all the data. Then you would scroll down, you hit send, and you're all done. So it makes it really, really simple. It takes 2 to 3 minutes to do. Next slide. So maybe you want to schedule a meeting. This is really simple too. Call them up, send them an email to say, I'm a constituent and I would like to come in and meet with you. Some federal elected officials have a web portal, so maybe you have to go do that. So it's all pretty easy and automated, but the important thing is you state your constituent, tell them the topics you want to talk about, appropriations for the arts, arts and education, and who's going to be attending. So you, some friends, etc. When you go to schedule a meeting, be flexible on the dates, times. Plan ahead, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. Don't look to try to do it tomorrow. Be mindful of their legislative schedules. Sometimes there's very busy times. It's going to be harder to get a meeting. Sometimes on the federal level, they're here in DC. Other times they're in their home offices in the district. So maybe make sure you know where they're at. And then for state legislatures, make sure you know that most of them are part-time, January through May on average. So oftentimes the best time to meet with your state legislator might be August. They're at home, they're not doing anything. So lots of great opportunities for you to do that. Next slide, please. So you have the meeting. Now what do you do? Do your homework, be prepared. What are those top 3 issues you want to talk about? Keep it to 2 or 3. Don't talk about a whole bunch. You'll confuse them. So figure that out. Have your talking points ready. If more than one person is there in the meeting, ahead of time, figure out who's going to talk about what. So again, you're organized, you know what you're talking about. Be ready to explain your topics in a way that will resonate. So combine this with a personal story. So just don't all talk about the data. Data is important. But again, that personal story, what the arts do for you, what the arts do for the community, etc. Bring some written background materials or email some written background materials if you want as a leave behind. This is a great way to extend the conversation, like to say, I'll send you some follow-up information. Now you're having a communication back and forth. So it's a great way to do. And then lastly, during the meeting, take a photo, use social media, tag the elected officials, and thank them for their time. And that will help again, help you and help them see you as a great asset to be able to help them with that. Next slide, please. And then lastly, follow up, put your elected officials on your organization's email list, personally invite them to events, ask them to participate in some way. So if you do the Nutcracker, ask them to be the ambassador that kind of comes in or whatever the case is, or the diplomat. arrange opportunities for them to come visit your facilities or other facilities. So again, they're connecting what they do there. Attend town hall meetings if they have them, or regular Zoom meetings. So there's lots of different ways you can work with that. And with that, next slide. I went through all my stuff. I always say you can't spell the arts. I'm sorry, you can't spell bipartisan without the arts. And so it's a great way to be able to affect what you believe in, and also what makes a difference in this country. So thank you very much. And Nina, I'll turn it back over to you.
Jay, before I let you go, that was a great presentation. I want to underscore a couple of things that you said that to really kind of bring it home. One is, in doing the homework, visiting the Member of Congress's website. Yes. And reading what are the issues that they care about. What are they doing within the committees that they sit on? And sign up for the Member of Congress's newsletter as well, yep. Because then you'll get regular contacts with them. Attend their town hall meetings and associate what we're doing on arts policy issues with their congressional initiatives as well. And then you mentioned that some members of Congress, you can request an appointment with the member, either by going through their scheduler, which was on the Arts Action Fund's email list of the Action Center and all their staff. And then the second, you mentioned that there was a portal that they would need to go to. That's actually located, as I understand it, on the Member of Congress's website itself, of a place where you click to say schedule an appointment. Is that right?
That's correct. They normally have a page that will say, hey, you do this electronically. Some of them even have a page that says also, send an email to scheduler at senator.whatever.gov type of thing too. So just look at their website as you're doing your research. That's great, Nina. Oftentimes they have an issue tab on their website, so you can see what their issues are there and what they've been doing. And also look at their social media. That's a great way to figure out what they're doing and where they're at too.
Yeah, that's a great one. And their social media handles were also listed on the Arts Action Center's description of the member, where their address is, and their social handles on social media that they're using. Thank you, Jay, for a great presentation. As a reminder to everybody, all of these slides are already available on the Arts Action Center's website, and we'll give that URL again at the end. So now we're going to move deep into the policy issues that I mentioned: funding for NEA, funding for arts education through Department of Education, tax policy issues, and other funding opportunities at other federal agencies other than the NEA and the Department of Education. And to help us through that section, we're going to ask Tushar Swain, who is the Director of Public Policy for Americans for the Arts, and Tara Proby, who is the Advocacy Manager at Americans for the Arts, to walk us through the policy issues and the messaging and what the asks are. And I hand it over to you, Tushar, first.
Thank you, Nina. We're so happy that you're spending some valuable time with us today and joining us in our year-round advocacy for the arts. Before we go into where we're going, we should talk a little bit about where we've been. So next slide, please. And like I said, we need to know, what we accomplished, what we succeeded at, and also what we didn't accomplish, because that's what we'll be working on for this year. We had big wins because of the work of arts advocates across the country in helping solidify a 15% increase to the National Endowment of the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, bringing them both to an all-time budget high of $207 million. Included in that appropriations bill, which passed and was signed into law at the end of last year, there are equity and diversity grant-making recommendations within the appropriations report language. We're going to talk a little bit more about what report language means, as opposed to legislative fix or codified language. But for now, know that this is a huge step forward. The funding increase and the equity language are a testament to the strong and persistent advocacy of the arts community. Next slide, please. I'm really excited about for the first time, a first time ever budget allocation of $10 million to the Department of Defense to support creative arts therapies at the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. The Intrepid Centers are dedicated to improving the lives of patients and families affected by traumatic brain injury through collaborative efforts with patients, families, and researchers. Similarly, an additional $5 million to the Department of Veterans Affairs was appropriated for its whole health initiative. And a whole health within the VA is an approach to care that supports veterans' health and well-being, where a health team gets to know the veteran and then establishes a personalized health plan based on their values, needs, and goals. So that's an excellent place for this money to be located. And then more than $66 million in direct project funding, also known as congressional earmarks. These were awarded to 68 arts organizations. And again, earmarks are a way for individual members of Congress to request funding for a project for their constituent directly during the budget project. And I would encourage you to watch a webinar that we did at the beginning of this month, which talks about the earmark process. And as that process is closed right now, it'll give you a head start going into next year. Next slide, please. And Nina talked about the importance of arts education to the field, and the Every Student Succeeds Act, which was passed in 2014, is the K-12 law of the land. In that bill, it listed arts education as a well-rounded subject that should be taught to all students K-12. And with this comes several well-rounded funding streams that you can find in various programs throughout the Every Student Succeeds Act. The first, which many know about, is Title I, Part A. This is the financial assistance program to schools with high percentages of children from low-income families. This program received a 5% bump. Title II, Part A is the Professional Development Block Grant, which can be used for all educators, including arts educators. This had a slight bump from last year. And then the Student Support and Academic Enrichment Grant, which is also known as the Title IV Block Grant. These funds can be used for technology, for safe and healthy initiatives within schools, and a well-rounded education. So you can understand why it's important to arts education. And that program received a 1.5% increase from last year. And then finally, the Department of Education's assistance for arts education programs. This is a competitive grant program that teachers can apply for professional development. Community partners can apply for if they want to assist in arts education in their communities, and of course the K-12 school itself. So that was that was just a brief summary of what we accomplished last year, and again, just a great assortment of wins for us. And as we move to the as we move to our advocacy, for this year, I think it's important in our advocacy to underscore the importance of the arts to local communities and across the country through data. And the arts and culture sector are a huge contributor to the economy. And we need to look no further than data released by the U.S. the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis, which earlier this month unveiled some data that said that the arts and culture economy activity increased to 4.4% of gross domestic product, topping the $1.02 trillion in 2021. This is a new high watermark, and it represents a larger percentage of GDP than powerhouse sectors such as transportation, construction, and agriculture. So if you don't take anything else from my part of the presentation, please leave today with your heads up high, knowing that you work in, you advocate for, or you support such a highly productive sector. Next slide, please. And so these next two slides are bills that did not pass last year, and we're hoping for more support this year. The next two pieces of legislation may be included within our advocacy in our next 30 days. But it's a wait and see on these, as we're not exactly sure when they're going to be introduced. The first is the Performing Arts Tax Parity Act. The acronym is PATPA. This deals with the qualified performing artist provision that allows performers to deduct their artist-related expenses as an adjustment to their income, as well as to take the standard deduction. So this is a significant tax break, assuming that you fulfilled the requirements, and therein lies the problem. Your adjusted gross income needs to be less than $16,000 before deducting these expenses. This was created in 1986 and has never been adjusted for inflation. And so PATPA does that and then some by increasing that threshold to $100,000 for single filers and then $200,000 for joint artists. Has a lot of support by groups as well as the arts communities across the country, as you can see there. And we are going to look to you all to hopefully work with your members of Congress to try and pass it this year. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass it over to Tara, who's been working on this piece of legislation.
Thank you, Tushar. So as Tushar mentioned, another bill that did not pass last year, but we are monitoring and asking advocates to encourage their members of Congress to support, is the Advancing Equity Through the Arts and Humanities Act of 2022. This bill was introduced by Congresswoman Barbara Lee in April of last year. And her office is tentatively looking to reintroduce the bill April of this year. So next month is when they're looking to reintroduce this legislation, particularly because April does mark the 5th anniversary of California's Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. And essentially, the bill works to address inequity in the arts and humanities, particularly by providing the National Endowment for the Arts funding to BIPOC-led organizations. And again, we're asking advocates to really encourage their members of Congress to help push this legislation forward, looking for that bipartisan support to advance this legislation. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Tara. And then one thing I'll add about that is that where I had spoke before about equity language in report language for an appropriations bill, that is not binding language. So where we have the equity directive coming from Congress last year, that is not binding, so the NEA doesn't necessarily have to do it, though we know that, we've been talking to them and we know that they are and that they will, and that equity is highly important to them. But to pass the bill that Tara just talked about would actually codify it into law, and so it wouldn't matter who was in power in the House, in the Senate, or who was in the presidency. They would have to abide by it. So that's why it's a very important piece of legislation. The relevant committees for arts policy, for our arts policy agenda are the House and Senate Interior Appropriations subcommittees. Why are these important? They are important because they determine what the funding levels will be for the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. The House and Senate Labor, Health and Human Services, Education Appropriations Subcommittee is highly important to us because they will determine well-rounded funding for K through 12 education at the federal level. And again, this includes arts education. And then the tax committees on the House side, it is called the Ways and Means Committee. On the Senate side, it is the Senate Finance Committee. And we had just talked about the Performing Arts Tax Parity Act. So that will be key for that piece of legislation, as well as the Charitable Act, which we will be talking about momentarily. Next slide, please. And I'm going to pass it over to Tara to talk about the committees and how to orient yourself as you look at key committee members.
Thank you, Tushar. So looking specifically at committees, we first have the House Interior Appropriations Subcommittee. And just to reinforce what Tushar mentioned, out of this subcommittee, we do have funding for the National Endowment for the Arts and National Endowment for the Humanities. The member who serves as the committee chair for this respective subcommittee is Congressman Mike Simpson, coming out of Idaho. And then the ranking member for this subcommittee is Congresswoman Shelley Pingree. And then for our advocates, we do have a link in the event you all would like to go on the respective subcommittee's website and see the entire membership list. And again, we are asking advocates to see if your member of Congress happens to serve on this subcommittee, and in turn, ask them to support the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Arts, increased funding specifically for those cultural agencies. Next slide, please. Next, we have the Senate Interior Appropriations Subcommittee. And the two members who are in positions of leadership for this subcommittee are Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon and Senator Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. And again, we've provided the link to this subcommittee in the event advocates would like to see if their member of Congress happens to sit on this subcommittee. Next slide, please. We have the House Labor, Health, Human Services, and Education Appropriations Subcommittee. And the members who are in positions of leadership for this subcommittee, Congressman Robert Aderholt from Alabama and Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro. Next slide, please. We have the Senate Labor, Health, and Human Services, Education Appropriations Subcommittee, with Senator Tammy Baldwin serving as the committee chair and Senator Shelley Moore Capito serving as the ranking member. We have the House Ways and Means Committee. This deals with tax legislation with Congressman Smith and Congressman Neal. Next slide, please. We have the Senate Committee on Finance Leadership, again dealing with tax legislation with Senator Wyden and Senator Crapo.
Thanks, Tara. We have put in the we've put in the chat links to all of the committees, and you know, as Tara mentioned earlier, I think it's important for you to familiarize yourself with you know, with the members of the committee, and particularly if a senator represents you, the state that you live in, and if a member of Congress represents represents the district in which you live. Very important to be in touch with them and to reach out to them. Quickly, as appropriations is a huge issue as it pertains to NEA and NEH funding, as well as the defense and veterans funding that we talked about earlier, and arts education. Just a quick quick outline of the appropriations process. The president is required by law to submit a budget to Congress. That typically happens in February or March. It happened this year, I believe, on March 9th. From there, from there, we go through where we are right now, which is the congressional appropriations request season. Because at this point in time, staff and members from appropriations committees are looking and taking requests from other congressional members. How do those other congressional members get their requests? They get that from the advocate or from the constituent who is meeting with them. So that's why your engagement right now is critically important. From there, and we'll be focusing a lot on the House side this year, particularly with NEA and NEH funding for appropriations subcommittees and appropriations committee markups, as well as floor votes that could potentially happen. And David talked about the ramifications of some of the new rules and how that could potentially affect some of the policies that we're advocating for today. And then if they get through floor votes, they will eventually need to conference to come to an agreement on a similar bill that they pass and then send over to the president. That hasn't happened quite that way in several years, and we don't necessarily anticipate it happening again, but it does provide an outline of places where we can be helpful and where we can advocate as an arts community to members of Congress. Next slide. And so if we take that template, the president's budget for NEA and NEH funding was at $211 million. It wasn't as, you know, it was, you know, potentially a little bit underwhelming, though maybe not so bad considering the environment that we are in currently. But we're advocating for at least $211 million. We've reached out to the overwhelming majority of congressional offices, asking for at least 211 million. And as you can see there, the rest is TBD, but it can be much higher in funding with your support and your help. Next slide. And then just very quickly, we are looking to add to the work that we did last year with that $10 million going to the Department Defense's Intrepid centers, this time advocating for $22 million to the Department of Defense's Morale, Welfare, and Recreation for the support and expansion of community arts programs and partnerships in all military services, understanding that the community component of creative arts therapies is so key and so helpful, particularly in the military. Next slide. And as you can see here, there was no budget request. We are asking for $22 million. That's where we're at right now, and TBD on committee markups as well as floor votes. Next slide. And then to add on to what we did last year with the $5 million for the VA's Whole Health Initiative is a $10 million ask to the Department of Veterans Affairs to expand creative arts therapists positions and talent pipeline for increasing support and educational training to expand local community arts partnerships, veterans, as well as their families, caregivers, and survivors. Again, this is a new program. So next slide. This would be a new program created, so there was not anything listed in the president's budget, but we are advocating for $10 million. Next slide. And then we talked about a well-rounded education. We are the president's requests are to the left. You can see that arts advocates are arts education advocates are advocating for level funding for Title I Part A, a slight increase for Title II Part A, the same for Title IV, and then for art assistance in arts education, which actually had level funding last year, we are asking for a significant increase, at least relatively, to $40 million. Next slide. And then I believe finally on the policy front, the Charitable Act, which I talked about, it's a tax bill. It was introduced earlier this month by Senators Lankford and Coons, among others. This legislation would make available to taxpayers who do not itemize on their tax return a below the line deduction for charitable giving on their federal income taxes, valued up to 1/3 of the standard deductions, which would be around $4,500 for an individual filer, and then $9,000 for a married joint filer. And we think that this is important for two reasons. One is that the arts giving is pro-cyclical, meaning that in times of good charitable or good economic times, the arts performs better than average, and then during bad times, it can perform significantly worse than average. And so it's important to have that incentive there now. Also, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 limits the amount of people who itemize now on their taxes. And so the deduction is highly important for non-itemizers right now. So next slide, please. And I'm going to hand it over to Tara to finish us off here.
Thank you, Tushar. So moving forward into what advocates can do within the next 30 days to really help move a lot of these policy issues is one, establishing relationships with both Democrat and Republican members of Congress. As Nina had mentioned earlier, we're asking our advocates to really develop those relationships early on. So it is a matter of scheduling meetings with your members of Congress, making sure that you're being effective in following up, and just creating a good rapport with members so that when legislation does come up that we need to move, we can be effective in that. Also, we're asking prior to congressional markups, you have your senators sign on to the FY24 Dear Colleague letter for increased NEA and NEH funding. The deadline for that is actually the 31st of March. However, we've really been working here at Americans for the Arts to let our senators know that we would like for them to sign on. And we've also been asking advocates to help elevate that message by having you reach out to your respective senators to push that through. Next slide, please. So again, continuing on what advocates can do within the next 30 days, we are asking you to encourage your members of Congress to join the following congressional caucuses. The first is going to be the Congressional Arts Caucus in the House, the Senate Cultural Caucus in the Senate, the Congressional STEAM Caucus, and the Congressional Humanities Caucus. Next slide, please. And then lastly, to reinforce what was discussed earlier, we are asking that you have your members of Congress sign on for NEA, NEH funding, increased NEA, NEH funding, any arts education funding, DoD and VA funding for community engagement and creative arts therapies, and also have them serve as co-sponsors for the Charitable Act. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you, Tushar. So we have given you a lot of policy information so far, and we're going to have a Q&A section to kind of break things down a little bit further after we hear from our final two speakers. We want to have you hear from grassroots constituents, just like yourself, about what their experience has been like in engaging with their members of Congress. We're going to first hear from Josh Stavros, who's the Assistant Professor and Associate Director of Arts Administration at Southern Utah University, who was just here in Washington meeting with members of Congress and bringing a delegation of his students, and what that experience was like, and to kind of demystify what the process is like. And then afterwards, we're going to have someone who gets very involved with their members of Congress back home in their district. So two examples. And so Josh, welcome, and we love to hear your stories now.
Thank you. Yeah, so I just did the math. This is my eighth. I was just in DC last week. This was my 8th year of doing visits. 2 years virtual, 6 years in person, and it was so validating to see everything on the slides up so far, because so much of what I have experienced that has been positive comes straight out of all of the things that Jay said at the beginning, and really just the application of those things. So a lot of what I'm going to say might even be a little bit of a repeat, but it's only to validate what has been my experience as quickly as just less than a week ago in some offices. So first things first, make sure you do that research. I can't say enough that knowing the committee assignments of the member of Congress that you're visiting is critical, because you could talk about a lot of things. You may have a deep interest in the arts and have a lot of policy areas that you think could be effective, but knowing exactly what their committees are and what the things that they're focusing on is going to really help you hone in and develop a strong message, because you want to go into those meetings, the ones that we've had with, whether with students or other constituents that have been the most successful, have had a purpose to the meeting. We're going in to talk about a specific bill. We're going in to talk about a specific appropriation request. We're going in to talk about a specific issue that may be affecting things back home. But knowing that we're not just going in to have a general conversation, to talk broadly about art support, because while that's not unimportant, it isn't critical to the meeting itself. And the more successful a meeting, you're more likely you are to have a successful meeting, is the more specificity you have. So taking any number of the things that Tushar and Tara just showed us, or the things that Jay talked about, I use the arts impact wheel. I use that all the time, whether with students or other constituents, to say, hey, what do we care about? Or looking at the list of committee assignments, what are some ways that we can connect what we know to the things that these legislators care about? So making sure that those meetings are tailored to those specific committee assignments or their pet projects and interests, and then talking specifically about that. I will say something that took me a little while to learn that I think may feel counterintuitive is I don't want to step on anything Rick's going to say, but staff are the key to everything. And a staff meeting is just as valuable in some ways, policy-wise, maybe even more so than a sit down with the representative or the senator. What we have started to do and trying to ask for is we try to ask for a meeting with the appropriate staffers. So checking with the scheduler or checking with that great Americans for the Arts website that says who's got the policy area, or who's, finding out when you submit that first email, who should we meet with, and making sure that you know who that is. And then say in the meeting, like, look, if the congressperson or the senator can be in on the meeting for a little bit, that's fine, but that's not critical, even just a picture at the end, because then that gives you time to talk policy and talk specifics, and you get the benefit of the political handshake and the photo at the end. And I've had 2 different staffers in 2 different offices tell me that that's actually one of the ways that they can tell whether they see you as a real lobbyist or just a constituent advocate, that they can tell that you're serious about what you're talking about, is if you don't demand time with the person, because the staff controls that person's time. They control the way that, and they guide the way that, Jay said it, you have to be generalists. So being able to connect with the specific staffer and give them the information that they need from you, the expert, is critical. And it helps sort of break down other barriers, knowing that you want the meeting with them and you're happy to visit with the congressperson or the senator if you can. The other thing that was hard for me initially is understanding the context of your visits. You are one of any large number of constituent groups or special interest groups that will be visiting with those staffers and those congresspeople on any given day. And it may be exciting for you. The first time I went, I felt it in my throat. I take students every year and they're terrified and excited. It's one of the more exciting days of your life. It's just another meeting for your congresspeople or for their staff, and that's not a bad thing. But knowing where you fit so that you can be memorable, the thing that I like to say is you are important in what you do, and I can't overstate that. What you're doing is important, but you're not special, because other people are doing this as well, and you want to make sure that they know that you know where you fit in the broad picture of any number of policy portfolio issues. So helping them see that helps you move forward without having to waste a lot of time. Jay already said it, follow up afterwards, follow up with an email. I just last week was visiting with someone in Senator Romney's office, and we talked about a number of things that Tushar mentioned, things that they hadn't heard of yet. So they were excited. We sent follow-up emails that included those, the research and white papers, so that they have the information and they don't have to get it all in a 10 or 15-minute meeting. Sometimes the meetings are short. Sometimes they're 10 or 15 minutes. Sometimes they're less. We had one meeting this week with a representative's chief of staff in the hallway because their office was so busy with appropriation season that there was nowhere for us to meet in the office. And so she pulled us out in the hallway and chatted for 5-10 minutes. That isn't necessarily a sign of disrespect. That's just a fact of life. And being able to accept those kinds of things will help you in your visits and your meetings with them. And then I already said it and don't want to step on anything Rick's going to say, but build those relationships with those staffers over time. Know who you're talking to and what they're working on. Know what else they've got going on and where it fits within their world. I can't speak enough to the importance of that, and how over time, the meeting that you have, if you're going to DC or you're visiting on Zoom, should have the context of other past meetings or conversations or other emails. That email plan is the email template builder is so good. One of the things a staffer said to me once is, we don't mind getting those. We especially love to see it when they're coming from personal email addresses. So even if you're copying and pasting stuff over so that you can share that information, I cannot emphasize in my last minute or so here, that the arts really are bipartisan. Utah in particular has a all Republican congressional delegation, and we are known for being a very conservative state. The arts and culture support in our state are phenomenal. And we have representatives who have demonstrated using the tools that have been mentioned already today over time, that the investment in arts and culture is worth it. And that despite other challenges or cultural possibilities, there are a number of Republicans and Democrats who are strongly in favor of the arts, and knowing what to say is understanding who they are and how to talk to them. So I talked to Senator Romney about very different things than I would talk to Chris Stewart or Blake Moore, who also happens to be from our state. Or knowing Mike Lee's politics, I talk to him very differently, but there's always something to talk about and there's always something to connect to. And that's what makes the meetings so successful. So that visit matters. What you're doing is important. Sometimes you might be the only person that they hear from. If you don't talk to them, Nobody else might, and especially from the district. So knowing that you are a constituent, that you care, and that you're reaching out to connect with them, and that visiting with the staffer about policy and thanking the congressperson or getting a small bit of face time with them, those are the things that will make a big difference and have made a big difference for me and other advocates. And again, learning this from Jay and the good people at the Utah Cultural Alliance has made a world of difference for us. So that's all I have. So I'm happy to help answer questions later, but that's all I've got so far. So thanks for the
Josh,
opportunity, and I hope to see people in DC.
Josh, sharing your experience is invaluable. Could you just take another 30 seconds to talk about what the uniqueness is and value of doing a Zoom meeting if you can't come to Washington?
Yes, I mean, the other thing that I didn't say is that every time I'm in an office or on Zoom, I ask the staffer what's something they wish that the constituents of the congressperson or senator back home knew about, and that they say, we want to hear from you. That they're waiting to hear on whether it's on key issues or just as constituent information. So, the nature of a visit is such that a Zoom meeting is good because it has many of the benefits of face-to-face, but you don't have to go in and, you don't have to make your way to DC or wait for someone to come to your district. And being able to connect face-to-face, even if it's remotely, with that staff person and understand who they are and what their job is with your representative is critical. And I think, like I say, sending emails is good. Jay did a great job of putting the list of importance there. I can't overemphasize how much happens face-to-face and how much person-to-person interaction matters. And the less anonymous it is, the better. And so if you can't afford or can't get to DC, that's okay. Send an email, be kind, be thoughtful, be civil. Even if you have something you are concerned about, you're also dealing with a bunch of 20-something people who are just trying to get through their workday. And while politics can be emotional, you want to be professional and engage with these people because you want something from them, and they need something from you, which is information. And the beautiful part, I think, of advocacy, whether it's online or in person, is that it's where the inspirational meets the real. And you could talk about a lot of different things. You could want millions, and you could want $1 billion for the arts, but it's not going to happen. So who do you talk to get what you can, and how do you connect with them? And whether you're yes, don't be afraid of meeting via Zoom. It's the next best thing to being in person. And the more personal connection you can create with those staffers and that congressperson, the better off you will be as you continue to visit with them.
Thank you, Josh. Very valuable information. Okay, so now I'm going to bring on our next speaker, who is Rick Stein, who is the president and CEO of the local arts agency in Orange County, California, called Arts Orange County. Very seasoned advocate in the arts, and he's going to share some examples of how he does it back in the district at home. Rick?
Thank you so much, Nina, and pleased to be with you today from the land of the Ahashiman Nation, Juanino Band of Mission Indians, and the Tongva people, who are the original artists and artisans in our community, and still very active as well. So, the presentation today has really been great, and the points that Jay made were terrific, and Tushar and Tara, getting really into all of that great detail. So I kind of feel that was all the play-by-play commentary, and that I'm here for the color commentary, to use a sports metaphor, and I hope it'll be a little bit fun. So let's go to the first slide, please. So this is just a brief overview of who we are. We're the Arts Council countywide for Orange County, California. We're in our 28th year. We have lots of traditional Arts Council programs and services, but advocacy is really at the top of our list for how we contribute to our community. Next slide, please. In engaging with members of Congress, one of the things that we began doing about 10 years ago at the invitation of a member of Congress was to work with her, that was Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, on her congressional art competition. She was actually disturbed that, although the winner of in each district around the nation gets a couple of round trip tickets on Southwest to fly for the reception in the US Capitol, that no other costs were covered. And so we worked with her and a local donor to put some prize money together for the top winner as well as for runners-up. And that really bonded us to her. And since then, we have 7 congressional districts here, 2 that are only slightly in Orange County. And the other 5 we work with directly. Every year on their congressional art competition, we promote it. We do this email blast you can see that shows the winner from the prior year and links and deadlines for each district. And then we go to the receptions and we're invited to present the prize money to the winners and pose for photos with the winners and the member of Congress. This really bonds us to these members of Congress in a way that is priceless. Next slide, please. Remember that Zoom is your friend, as has been just talked about. As you can see in that left-hand slide, we're with Congresswoman Katie Porter, a group of arts leaders. We gathered together, and there is strength in numbers. And if you can put a delegation like this together to have such a conversation, you have a better chance of getting a meeting with your member of Congress. Don't be disappointed, though, if you only get 15 minutes of their time. They're hopping from meeting to meeting, but they do want to usually meet everyone on there. And then it's a great opportunity to take a screenshot like this of everybody at the meeting and share it on your social media, which they also do. And also remember that the elected staff members are your friends. And we just had a lecture by NEA Chair Maria Rosario Jackson here, in which, of course, all the electeds were in DC. They were working. It was on a weekday in the middle of the week, so their district coordinators attended to represent them, and it was a great opportunity to ensure that they were represented at the meeting, at the lecture, at the event, and we actually called them out in our introductions. We mentioned that there were representatives of those members of Congress. Next slide, please. So this is just standard operating procedure. You should be inviting elected officials to all of your events. And here we have a picture of the mayors of the 3 largest cities in Orange County, Anaheim, Irvine, and Santa Ana, with a couple of arts and education deans from UC Irvine at the lecture. Also, you should recognize your electeds. If you have an awards program at all, it's a great opportunity. With the pandemic relief funds that our County Board of Supervisors made available, we decided we really needed to honor them. And so 2 of them appeared in person, 1 sent a staff member. And guess what? We didn't forget about the ones who couldn't come to the event. We went to their offices to do photo ops there with them and have a chance to shake hands and thank them for their support. And remember, these members of Congress have a printing press in their office where they print off all of these certificates to honor people in their district and honor organizations. It's another great opportunity to connect with them. So keep them informed of the accomplishments of your organization, because they'll look for those opportunities to get in front of a camera with you at any time they can, believe me. Next slide, please. So another great opportunity to connect with elected officials is when you have an artist of note or an arts dignitary coming to town. We had the California Arts Council Executive Director, John Moscone, visiting for the lecture. So he was here a day before. We made an appointment with the Chair of the Board of Supervisors to introduce him to Chair Wagner. He brought all his colleagues in, and we thought we were just going to do a 5-minute photo op, but then they sat down with us for an hour to talk about why the arts are important in their lives and the lives of our community. So you never know what can happen in that regard too. And of course, request a proclamation. We're often suggesting that for Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month. But in our case, the California Arts Council requires each county arts agency to get a resolution of their County Board of Supervisors to confer official status as a state local partner. So if you are in the Arts Council business, that's something that is also an opportunity to connect on an annual basis with your Board of Supervisors. Okay, next slide. So this is a big thing for me. Don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. You are, as a private citizen, able to support arts-friendly candidates. Now, just don't do it on your nonprofit organization company time, or use your work computer, phone, or letterhead, or finances to do that. That is a no-no. But when you attend fundraising events for candidates and elected officials, you never know what you'll learn about them. Mike Levin's mother was the first female toy designer at Mattel, and you never know who you'll meet. I happened to attend some candidate's fundraiser, and I met the assembly speaker there and had a great conversation. And he has proven to become a very pivotal figure in advancing the arts agenda in California. And he gave me his personal contact information and responds whenever I reach out to him. And remember another thing, we are looking for long-term relationships with these people. Think of them as your individual donors, as you would, because your school board member or city council member might in 2 years run for county board of supervisors or state assembly or for Congress. These people move up the ranks and they will remember you. You'll have established a relationship with them. They'll look at you like Katie Porter did when I was in the Oakland airport recently. I was about to board a plane and I hear my name, and Congresswoman Porter is boarding the same plane and says, "Rick, what are you doing here?" So, these are long-term relationships that will, pay off, just very generously to our field. And remember, they're people too. It is person-to-person business. And just this last slide, if we can move to it, is during the pandemic, our advocacy efforts resulted in over $85 million in relief funding to our community in Orange County. And yes, that includes, the shuttered venue operating grants, which were a huge part of that, but also all of the different PPP and grant programs that were available. And we were even contracted by the county to manage over $2 million worth of grant making from their pandemic relief. So let me just see if I have anything else. Remember, it should be fun. It's not a burden. It's not a task. You're getting to know other people. And believe me, ask them first what they know about the arts. Did they ever play a musical instrument? Did they, take lessons in painting? Do they write some poetry? You would be surprised at how many elected officials have deep personal involvement in the arts, either themselves or their families, that motivate their support for many of the things that we are asking them to do. So I think I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Rick. You are an amazing advocate, and I hope we can replicate your type of efforts across the country. There is a congressional art competition led in every member of Congress's office on the House side. So you can engage with your members that way too. So I'm now going to ask a couple of our other speakers to join us for a shortened Q&A because the content's been so rich here today. So Jay and Tushar, if you could also join Josh and Rick with me to go over at least some of the Q&A. And what I can promise is we will take down these Q&A questions and get back to you. So in case we are not able to address them all. So a few of the questions that are more general that can affect everyone is, in our advocacy efforts, how do we balance the intrinsic value of the arts for art's sake, with the demonstrated social and economic impact of the arts? And I think going to Rick, who's right there on the ground in the local level, to first take on an answer for that.
My biggest answer is that know your audience. And so when, I'm referring this back to the relationship building with our elected officials, know what is important to them. To some of them, the economic impact of the arts and providing that, arts and culture, arts and economic prosperity data. Or in California, we have the Otis report on the creative economy. That data is important to some people, but you'd be surprised. Some of the electeds who seem to be so fiscally oriented are also the ones who want that social impact. They will tell you the arts save lives. I have seen it in my district, and this is why the arts are important. So yes, we have all of these talking points and all, the whole wheel of different ways that the arts are important to our communities, to our lives. But that upfront research, knowing what is important to the person you're meeting with, will ensure that you touch upon the right points that connect with them.
That's terrific. And I recently spoke to the chair of the House Interior Appropriations Committee, a Republican, Mike Simpson from Idaho. I asked him the same question almost. And what he said is, I need our constituents to come in and tell me how the arts improve our communities. Bottom line, talk about how the arts are doing great things in your community. Another question that came up that I'm going to send to Josh, and I'm going to give a little answer to it too, is can I get any ID or other identifiers to show that I'm an arts advocate? And I noticed, Josh, on your wall to your right behind your shoulder are a couple of indicators that you use that you probably carry around with you. What are they saying? They're from the Arts Action Fund, by the way, which you can get.
Yep. So I was going to say, I kept them there. I keep them there on purpose. I have more buttons farther over if you look at my mess of a desk, but I've got even more. But yeah, but whether it's a state or local organization or Americans for the Arts, there are a number of little swag items or things that you can create that help identify you. So I've got the Arts Action Fund, Arts Advocate, and I vote. We've got the Museums Yes, and Arts Advocate. And then below that is something fairly specific to Utah. The Utah Culture Alliance runs a website called Now Playing Utah that's an aggregator for all arts and culture events in the state, which is one of the things we like to talk about with our elected officials, that whether they're visitors or people coming, there's a way to see what's going on. And if you want to, if you have something like that in your own area, showing the sheer number, the volume of events, whether they're live or remote or educational or museum exhibitions, just seeing how much is going on can help give a sense of the impact. And believe it or not, I think internally at least, we actually divide things by congressional districts so that we can use this tool. It's not just the whole state or a county or a zip code. We can look by congressional district and say, here's everything going on in your district, which is a big thing, especially for members of the House of Representatives. Yeah. They're so focused on their districts.
And if you go to the Arts Action Fund site and you go to the Arts Vote section, you can grab this backdrop that I have for free and put it on any Zoom call that you do with your member of Congress or anything else. We have badges, social media badges on there. And then there's a section that you can purchase very cheaply, lots of swag about being an arts advocate. So I encourage you to do that as well. And then for Tushar and Jay, for the last question is, I'd like to do a wrap up of what to do in the next 30 days. And I'm going to throw out a list that I've compiled based on what I heard today. And I'd love to see if I caught enough and if there's anything you want to add. First is learn about your member of Congress. Go to their website, go to their social media sites to figure out what's important to them, what committees they're on, and are those committees key to things that we're concerned about. But even if they don't sit on a committee we care about, you still want to talk to them because of floor vote issues, about our NEA issues and arts education issues. So their vote matters then. But if they're an influencer on our topic, look at those committees.
If I could just say one thing in there, even though they don't sit on the committee, maybe their best friend who's a senator does sit on that committee too. And so you say, hey, can you talk to Senator X on our behalf? And so that's a good point too.
Yeah. And then both Tushar and Jay talked about, we want you to email, get started by just going to our Action Center after you've identified your members of Congress, to actually go ahead and start with sending an email about getting the NEA increase based on the president's request of 211. Then there are some bills that are coming up to be co-sponsored. We're going to be adding those action items very soon to our site because they just recently got added, like the Charitable Act. But coming very soon is that Performing Arts Tax Parity Act and the Advancing Equity Through the Arts Act with Barbara Lee, that we're going to be giving you opportunities on that action center to co-sign. Tara had brought up, we want you to sign Dear Colleague letters. I'd like to offer, there's the resource center that we put up. In the next hour or so, we will post the Dear Colleague letter for the Senate and who has already signed. And if their name is not on the list, that means your senator has not signed yet and would be a great target for you to go to. That question came up in the chat. Tushar, do you want to conclude with anything before we just give our final thanks?
No, I think that that's important. We will have that up. And then I think the final thing is, not to be buried underneath all of the policy is at the end, we did talk about, the Congressional Arts Caucus, the Congressional STEAM Caucus, the Senate Cultural Caucus. These are all important things to get your members onto. And so that simple ask, if you're not, interested in delving into the policy, is equally as important.
Yeah, and to find that information, two things are going to happen. Momentarily, we're going to post our Congressional Arts Report Card from last year that shows, were they a member of the Arts Caucus? Were they a member of the Humanities Caucus? Were they a member of the STEAM Caucus? Did they co-sign these Dear Colleague letters? Did they co-sponsor a bill? But since you have freshman members that got elected in 2022, you can assume the answer is no on all of those because they were not in Congress. So you will meet as a freshman member, you will want them to join all of those things. And you'll go through the Congressional Arts Report Card that we put out last year that will have details for those who are incumbents that came back into Congress. So with this, I'd like to just go to our final slide and give everyone the URL where you're going to find all of this content, including eventually the video for today's webinar, with probably by the end of the week. So please take down this website because everything is online right now. So you don't have to wait to see our PowerPoint slides. You don't have to wait to find how your legislators are and how they voted in the past, the state arts fact sheets, the link to the Explorer. And then, like I said, in a couple of days, the video for today's broadcast. I'd like to thank all of our speakers. I'd like to thank our ASL interpreter who had to do this all by herself today. Normally she has a helper, and we are very grateful to you. And I'd like to close out by thanking all of you in today's webinar for being part of a growing arts advocacy movement. And I hope one of the last things that you'll do is try to recruit more members to our cause. It's free to join at the Arts Action Fund's website. Thank you and have a great day, everyone.